The morning sun cast long shadows across the bustling marketplace of downtown London, as Officer James Mitchell adjusted his radio and checked his watch. It was 9:15 a.m. on what seemed like an ordinary Tuesday in October. The local police station had received multiple reports about a suspicious individual loitering near the government district, wearing what witnesses described as an unusual military-style uniform. Detective Sarah Collins, a 10-year veteran of the Metropolitan Police, had been assigned to investigate these reports alongside Officer Mitchell. The descriptions were vague but concerning enough to warrant attention. Several shop owners had called in about a man in his 30s, tall and imposing, wearing what appeared to be an elaborate military dress uniform, complete with ceremonial decorations and a distinctive red sash. As they approached the area near Westminster Bridge, Collins spotted their target immediately. The man stood with perfect posture near a government building, his uniform immaculate and his bearing unmistakably military. However, something seemed off to the officers. His presence in such formal dress during regular hours, combined with his stationary position for over 2 hours, had raised red flags among the local business community. The individual in question was Marcus Thompson, a 34-year-old member of the Queen's Guard who had just completed an overnight ceremonial duty at Buckingham Palace. Exhausted from the demanding 12-hour shift, Thompson had stopped at a nearby cafe to grab breakfast before heading home to his flat in South London. His ceremonial uniform, complete with its distinctive red tunic and bearskin hat, was regulation dress that he was required to wear during his commute back to barracks. Thompson had served in the British Army for 12 years before being selected for the prestigious Queen's Guard unit. His record was exemplary, with commendations for service in Afghanistan and Iraq. The ceremonial role was both an honor and a responsibility he took seriously. However, his fatigue from the long night duty had made him slower to respond to his surroundings than usual. As Collins and Mitchell approached, they noticed Thompson's apparent disorientation and his failure to immediately acknowledge their presence. What they didn't realize was that Thompson was dealing with the effects of standing motionless for hours, a common challenge for ceremonial guards that can cause temporary dizziness and disorientation when finally allowed to move. The officers had been briefed about increased security concerns in the area, particularly regarding individuals attempting to impersonate military personnel for various fraudulent purposes. Recent incidents across Europe had made law enforcement particularly vigilant about anyone in military dress who couldn't immediately provide proper identification or explanation for their presence. Thompson, meanwhile, was completely unaware that he had become the subject of police attention. His training had taught him to maintain awareness of his surroundings, but the combination of exhaustion and the assumption that his uniform would clearly identify him as legitimate military personnel had created a dangerous blind spot. The stage was set for a confrontation that would escalate far beyond what anyone could have anticipated, involving protocols, pride, and a series of misunderstandings that would soon bring the full weight of the Royal Regiment to bear on a simple case of mistaken identity. Detective Collins approached Thompson with caution, her hand instinctively moving toward her radio. The protocol for dealing with potential security threats near government buildings was clear, but something about the man's bearing suggested genuine military training. Still, recent intelligence briefings about sophisticated imposters had made her err on the side of caution. "Excuse me, sir," Collins called out, her voice carrying the authority of her position. "I'm Detective Collins with the Metropolitan Police. Could I have a word with you?" Thompson turned slowly, his movements deliberate and controlled despite his fatigue. Years of military discipline had ingrained in him the importance of measured responses, especially when dealing with civilian authorities. However, his exhaustion made his reaction time slower than usual, which the officers interpreted as potential evasiveness. "Good morning, Detective," Thompson replied, his voice steady but showing signs of weariness. "How may I assist you?" Officer Mitchell positioned himself at an angle that would allow him to intervene if necessary, while keeping his body language as non-threatening as possible. The man before them certainly looked the part of a ceremonial guard, but training had taught them that appearances could be deceiving. "We've received several reports about someone in military dress in this area," Collins explained. "Could you provide some identification and explain your presence here?" Thompson reached slowly toward his inner pocket, a movement that immediately heightened the officer's alertness. What he retrieved was his military identification card, ceremonial duty roster, and travel orders authorizing his presence in the area. However, the documents were in a military format that the officers weren't immediately familiar with, and the official seals and stamps looked elaborate enough to potentially be sophisticated forgeries. Collins examined the identification carefully, but her training in document verification was primarily focused on civilian documents. The military ID featured security elements she couldn't immediately authenticate, and the official language used in the duty order seemed almost too formal to be genuine. "Sir, I'm going to need you to come with us for further verification," Collins announced. "This is just a precautionary measure while we confirm your identity and status." Thompson's expression shifted from tired compliance to genuine concern. He understood the officers were doing their job, but the suggestion that his identity needed verification struck at his professional pride. More importantly, he was keenly aware that any incident involving a member of the Queen's Guard could have serious repercussions. "Detective, I assure you that my credentials are in order," Thompson said, maintaining his composure despite growing frustration. "I've just completed ceremonial duty and am authorized to be in this area. If you contact the Guard Division at Wellington Barracks, they can verify my status immediately." Mitchell stepped forward, interpreting Thompson's detailed knowledge of military procedures as either genuine credentials or an extremely well-prepared imposter. The mention of specific military installations actually increased their suspicion, as recent security briefings had warned about individuals who researched military details to enhance their deceptions. The situation was complicated by the fact that it was still early morning, and many administrative offices weren't yet fully operational. The duty desk at Wellington Barracks was staffed, but getting through the proper channels for verification could take considerable time. Collins made the decision that would set the day's events in motion. "Sir, I'm placing you in protective custody pending verification of your identity. This is for everyone's security, including your own." Thompson's military training warred with his growing sense of the absurdity of the situation. He could comply and likely resolve the matter within hours, or he could assert his rights and potentially escalate the incident. What he couldn't know was that his decision would trigger a chain of events that would bring the full attention of the Royal Regiment to this quiet London street. The detention process began with what should have been routine procedures, but Thompson's unique status created immediate complications. At the local police station, the desk sergeant, William Hayes, had processed thousands of individuals over his 25-year career, but he had never dealt with someone claiming to be an active member of the Queen's Guard. Thompson maintained his dignity throughout the booking process, answering questions with military precision while repeatedly requesting that someone contact his commanding officer. His uniform, which had seemed suspicious on the street, now appeared even more elaborate under the harsh fluorescent lights of the police station. "Name?" Sergeant Hayes asked, beginning the standard intake procedure. "Guardsman Marcus Thompson, service number 258473991, Queen's Guard Division Grenadier Guards," Thompson responded, providing information with the crisp efficiency of someone accustomed to military protocols. Hayes paused, looking up from his paperwork. The specificity of Thompson's response was either the mark of genuine military service or an incredibly detailed fabrication. The service number format appeared correct, and Thompson's knowledge of military structure seemed authentic. Meanwhile, Detective Collins had begun the verification process but encountered immediate obstacles. The phone number Thompson provided for Wellington Barracks connected her to a duty officer, who seemed surprised by the inquiry. Military protocol required confirmation through proper channels, which could take several hours during normal business operations. The duty officer, Corporal Williams, was immediately concerned when he received Collins's call. "You're saying you have Guardsman Thompson in custody? He should be completing his duty rotation and returning to barracks. Are you certain you have the right person?" This response should have resolved the situation quickly, but Collins interpreted the corporal's surprise as potential confirmation that Thompson was an imposter. If he was supposed to be at barracks, what was he doing in downtown London in full ceremonial dress? What Collins didn't understand was the complex nature of ceremonial duties. Guards often had extended responsibilities that required travel throughout London, and the timing of duty rotations wasn't always predictable. Thompson's presence in the area was not only authorized, but required as part of his official duties. As the morning progressed, Thompson's absence from his expected check-in began to trigger concern within the military chain of command. Sergeant Major Davies, Thompson's immediate superior, noticed when Thompson failed to report for his scheduled debriefing. In the highly structured world of the Queen's Guard, such deviations from protocol were immediately investigated. Davies began making calls to track down Thompson's whereabouts. The Guard Division maintained strict accountability for all personnel, especially when they were in ceremonial dress and representing the royal family. The uniform Thompson wore wasn't just clothing, it was a symbol of the monarchy itself. Back at the police station, Thompson remained cooperative but increasingly concerned about the implications of his detention. He understood that his absence from duty would trigger military protocols designed to ensure the security of royal ceremonies and personnel. What started as a simple case of mistaken identity was rapidly becoming a significant incident. The desk sergeant noticed Thompson's growing agitation and mistook it for the nervousness of someone whose deception was unraveling. In reality, Thompson was calculating the growing complexity of explaining his unauthorized absence to his superiors, regardless of the circumstances. Detective Collins received another call from Wellington Barracks, this time from Sergeant Major Davies himself. "Detective, I understand you have one of my guardsmen in custody. Guardsman Thompson is an exemplary soldier with 12 years of service. What exactly is the nature of this detention?" The authoritative tone and detailed knowledge displayed by Davies should have ended the matter immediately. However, Collins had been trained to be skeptical of phone calls that couldn't be independently verified. For all she knew, this could be part of an elaborate scheme involving multiple accomplices. The verification process, that should have taken minutes, was stretching into hours, and with each passing moment, the stakes were rising for everyone involved. Thompson's continued absence was beginning to attract attention at the highest levels of the military hierarchy. By noon, Thompson's absence had escalated through the military chain of command with alarming speed. Captain Richardson, the officer responsible for Thompson's unit, had been notified of the situation and was growing increasingly concerned. The Queen's Guard operated under protocols that treated any unaccounted-for personnel as a potential security breach. Richardson immediately contacted Lieutenant Colonel Morrison, the commanding officer of the entire Guard Division. Morrison's reaction was swift and decisive. "Captain, if one of our guardsmen is being detained by civilian authorities without proper coordination, this becomes a matter of institutional protocol. Initiate a welfare check immediately." The welfare check protocol was designed to protect military personnel from unlawful detention and ensure their rights were preserved when dealing with civilian authorities. What started as a simple verification request was now becoming a formal military response to what they perceived as potential overreach by local police. At the police station, Detective Collins was becoming increasingly frustrated with what she saw as elaborate attempts to verify Thompson's identity. Multiple calls from various military personnel, each claiming authority and demanding Thompson's release, seemed suspicious rather than reassuring. Her training in dealing with sophisticated criminal organizations made her wary of coordinated efforts to secure a suspect's release. Sergeant Hayes, meanwhile, was beginning to have doubts about the detention. Thompson's behavior throughout the morning had been exemplary. He remained courteous, provided detailed and consistent information, and showed none of the signs of deception Hayes had learned to recognize over his long career. "Detective Collins," Hayes said quietly, pulling her aside. "This man has been nothing but cooperative. His story hasn't changed, his documentation looks authentic, and we've had multiple calls from people claiming to be his superiors. Maybe we should consider that he might be legitimate." Collins appreciated Hayes' experience but remained committed to thorough verification. "Sergeant, we've seen sophisticated operations before. The fact that multiple people are calling could mean we've stumbled onto something bigger than a simple case of impersonation." What Collins didn't realize was that her caution was triggering increasingly serious military protocols. Lieutenant Colonel Morrison had now contacted the Ministry of Defense Liaison Office, reporting the detention of a guardsman by local authorities. The MOD took such matters seriously, as they involved not only individual rights but the broader relationship between military and civilian law enforcement. Thompson, observing the growing tension around his situation, requested permission to make a personal phone call. Military personnel have specific rights regarding communication during detention, and Thompson wanted to notify his wife, Sarah, about his circumstances before she heard about it through official channels. Sarah Thompson, a nurse at a London hospital, received her husband's call with shock and growing anger. Marcus had never been in trouble with the law, and the idea that he was being treated as a criminal while in uniform seemed incomprehensible to her. "They think you're impersonating a soldier?" Sarah asked, her voice rising in disbelief. "Marcus, you've been in the Queen's Guard for 3 years. You've stood watch at Buckingham Palace, participated in state ceremonies. This is insane." Thompson tried to calm his wife while remaining aware that his conversation was likely being monitored. "Sarah, just stay calm. This will get resolved, but you might want to contact our legal support through the regiment." The mention of legal support caught the attention of the officers monitoring the call. In their experience, innocent people rarely requested lawyers so quickly. What they didn't understand was that military personnel had access to specialized legal support designed specifically for situations involving civilian military jurisdictional issues. As the afternoon approached, Lieutenant Colonel Morrison made a decision that would transform the entire situation. He dispatched a formal military delegation to the police station, led by Captain Richardson and accompanied by the regimental adjutant and a military police liaison. This wasn't just a verification visit. It was an official military response to what they now considered wrongful detention of one of their personnel. The delegation's arrival would mark the moment when a simple case of mistaken identity became a serious incident involving institutional pride, protocol, and the delicate balance between civilian and military authority. For Thompson, still maintaining his composure in a holding cell, relief was finally approaching, but the consequences of the day's events were just beginning to unfold. At 2:30 p.m., the atmosphere at the local police station changed dramatically when Captain Richardson arrived with his delegation. The presence of multiple uniformed military officers, including the regimental adjutant bearing official documentation, immediately caught the attention of everyone in the building. Chief Inspector David Martinez, the senior officer on duty, emerged from his office to address what was clearly becoming a significant incident. Martinez had 20 years of experience managing complex situations, but the arrival of a formal military delegation was unprecedented in his career. "Captain Richardson, I understand you're here about the individual we have in custody," Martinez said, extending his hand professionally. "I assure you we're following proper procedures for verification." Richardson's response was measured but firm. "Chief Inspector, we're here because Guardsman Thompson, one of our most trusted personnel, has been detained for over 5 hours without proper cause. We have documentation proving his identity, his duty status, and his authorization to be in the area where he was apprehended." The regimental adjutant, Major Patricia Wells, stepped forward with a leather portfolio containing official documents. Her presence added significant weight to the military response, as adjutants typically handled only the most serious administrative matters. "Chief Inspector," Major Wells said, opening the portfolio, "these are Guardsman Thompson's complete service records, his current duty assignments, and verification from the Ministry of Defense regarding his status. Additionally, we have photographic evidence of him performing his duties at Buckingham Palace as recently as last week." Martinez examined the documents carefully, immediately recognizing their authenticity. The official seals, watermarks, and security features were far beyond what any impersonator could reasonably forge. More importantly, the military delegation's willingness to stake their own reputations on Thompson's identity was compelling evidence. Detective Collins, who had been observing the proceedings, found herself in an increasingly uncomfortable position. The evidence presented by the military delegation was overwhelming, but she had to consider the possibility that she had made a significant error in judgment. "Major Wells," Collins interjected, "while these documents appear authentic, our initial detention was based on multiple civilian reports of suspicious behavior. We followed standard protocol for investigating potential security threats." Captain Richardson's expression hardened slightly. "Detective, What you describe as suspicious behavior was a guardsman completing his authorized duties while exhausted from a 12-hour ceremonial shift. The fact that civilians found his presence noteworthy doesn't justify treating him as a criminal. The tension in the room was palpable as both sides defended their actions. Chief Inspector Martinez recognized that the situation required careful handling to prevent it from escalating into a formal complaint against the department. Meanwhile, Thompson was brought from the holding area to participate in the identification process. His relief at seeing his commanding officers was evident, but his military bearing remained intact despite the circumstances. "Guardsman Thompson," Captain Richardson said formally, "are you in good health and have you been treated appropriately during your detention?" Thompson's response was carefully measured. "Sir, I am in good health. The officers have followed their procedures, though I believe there has been a significant misunderstanding about my status and authority to be in the area." Major Wells documented Thompson's statement while preparing the paperwork necessary for his immediate release. However, the incident had already triggered military protocols that extended far beyond simply retrieving Thompson from police custody. "Chief Inspector," Major Wells announced, "while we appreciate your cooperation in resolving this matter, I must inform you that this incident will be reported through military channels to ensure that proper protocols are established for future interactions between your department and military personnel." So, implications of this statement were clear to everyone present. The wrongful detention of a Queen's Guard member would likely result in formal reviews, policy changes, and potentially embarrassing publicity for the police department. Detective Collins realized that her careful adherence to security protocols had backfired spectacularly. What she had intended as responsible law enforcement had become a jurisdictional incident with far-reaching consequences. As the paperwork for Thompson's release was completed, the military delegation maintained their professional demeanor, but the underlying message was unmistakable. The Queen's Guard protected more than just royal ceremonies. They protected the dignity and rights of their own personnel with equal determination. The formal release process took another hour, during which the full scope of the day's misunderstanding became clear to everyone involved. Thompson signed the necessary paperwork while maintaining the dignified composure expected of a Queen's Guard. Though the strain of the ordeal was evident in his tired eyes, Chief Inspector Martinez found himself in the uncomfortable position of explaining the department's actions to increasingly senior military officials. The phone calls had begun coming in from the Ministry of Defense, and Martinez knew that his handling of the situation would be scrutinized at the highest levels. "Captain Richardson," Martinez said as Thompson gathered his personal effects, "I want to assure you that this was never intended as disrespect toward Guardsman Thompson or the military. Our officers were responding to civilian reports and following established security protocols." Richardson nodded diplomatically while internally noting every detail for his official report. "Chief Inspector, we understand that your officers believed they were acting appropriately. However, this incident highlights the need for better coordination between civilian and military authorities, particularly when dealing with personnel in ceremonial dress." Major Wells had been quietly documenting the entire proceeding, creating a detailed record that would become part of the official incident report. Her notes would eventually reach the desk of the Colonel Commandant of the regiment, and potentially higher authorities within the military hierarchy. As Thompson prepared to leave with his military escort, Detective Collins approached him directly. The weight of her mistake was becoming increasingly clear, and she felt compelled to address the situation personally. "Guardsman Thompson," she said quietly, "I want you to know that our actions today were based on genuine security concerns, not any disrespect for your service. I hope you can understand that we were trying to do our job responsibly." Thompson considered his response carefully, aware that his words would likely be included in official reports. "Detective Collins, I understand that you believed you were acting appropriately. However, I hope this incident can serve as a learning experience for better cooperation between our respective services." The diplomatic nature of Thompson's response impressed everyone present, demonstrating the professionalism that had earned him selection for the Queen's Guard. Even under difficult circumstances, he maintained the dignity expected of someone who represented the Crown. Captain Richardson escorted Thompson from the police station, but their departure marked the beginning, rather than the end of the incident's consequences. The military delegation's presence had been noted by local media, who were beginning to ask questions about why Queen's Guard officers were at a police station. Back at Wellington Barracks, Lieutenant Colonel Morrison was preparing comprehensive reports for his superiors. The wrongful detention of a guardsman would require explanations to the Ministry of Defense, the palace authorities, and potentially parliamentary oversight committees responsible for military affairs. The irony wasn't lost on anyone involved that Thompson's exemplary service record and spotless reputation had worked against him during the detention. His calm, professional demeanor had been interpreted as suspicious rather than reassuring, while his detailed knowledge of military protocols had seemed too perfect to be genuine. Thompson's wife, Sarah, was waiting at the barracks when the military convoy returned. Her relief at seeing her husband safe was mixed with anger at the treatment he had received. As a healthcare professional, she understood the importance of following protocols, but the idea that Marcus could be mistaken for an impersonator seemed absurd. "How are you holding up?" Sarah asked as she embraced her husband, noting the exhaustion that went far beyond his original fatigue from ceremonial duty. "I'm fine," Thompson replied, though both knew the incident would have lasting implications for his military career. Being detained by civilian authorities, regardless of the circumstances, would become part of his permanent record and require explanations in future security clearances and promotions. The military's response to the incident was swift and comprehensive. Within hours, protocols were being reviewed and updated to prevent similar situations. More importantly, the regiment's leadership was considering formal complaints against the police department to ensure accountability and prevent future incidents. As the day ended, all parties involved were beginning to understand that what had started as routine police work had escalated into an institutional incident with consequences that would extend far beyond the individuals directly involved. 3 weeks after the incident, the full consequences of Thompson's detention had rippled through both military and civilian institutions. The story had gained media attention when a local reporter noticed the unusual presence of military officers at the police station and began investigating the circumstances. The headline, "Queen's Guard Detained by Police in Case of Mistaken Identity," appeared in several London newspapers, bringing unwanted scrutiny to both the Metropolitan Police and the military's handling of the situation. Public opinion was largely sympathetic to Thompson, with many expressing outrage that a soldier in service to the Crown could be treated as a suspected imposter. Lieutenant Colonel Morrison's official report had reached the highest levels of military command, resulting in a formal review of protocols for interaction between military personnel and civilian law enforcement. The Ministry of Defense issued new guidelines, requiring immediate military notification whenever uniformed service members were detained by civilian authorities. Detective Collins found herself the subject of an internal investigation by the police department. While her actions had followed established protocols, the department's leadership recognized the need for better training regarding military personnel and ceremonial duties. Collins was eventually cleared of wrongdoing but required to complete additional training in military liaison procedures. Chief Inspector Martinez implemented new policies requiring consultation with military authorities before detaining anyone in ceremonial dress. The department also established direct communication channels with local military installations to enable rapid verification of personnel status. For Thompson, the incident became an unexpected catalyst for positive change within the Queen's Guard. His professional handling of the situation under difficult circumstances was noted by senior officers, and he was commended for maintaining the dignity of his position despite the circumstances. The regimental leadership used Thompson's experience to develop better protocols for guardsmen dealing with civilian authorities. New procedures required guards to carry enhanced identification and provided clear guidelines for responding to police inquiries while maintaining military bearing. Thompson's story became part of the training curriculum for new Queen's Guard members, illustrating the importance of patience and professionalism when representing the Crown in civilian contexts. His ability to remain composed during wrongful detention was held up as an example of proper military conduct. The incident also led to improved coordination between the Metropolitan Police and military installations throughout London. Regular liaison meetings were established to ensure better understanding between the services and prevent similar misunderstandings. 6 months later, Thompson was promoted to Lance Corporal, with his handling of the detention incident specifically mentioned in his promotion citation. His experience had demonstrated exactly the kind of character and professionalism the Queen's Guard sought in its leaders. Detective Collins and Thompson eventually met again at a joint training exercise designed to improve police-military cooperation. Their interaction was professional and cordial, with both acknowledging that they had been doing their respective jobs under difficult circumstances. The case became a study in institutional learning, demonstrating how a simple misunderstanding could escalate into a significant incident, but also how professional organizations could adapt and improve their procedures based on real-world experiences. Thompson continued his service with the Queen's Guard with enhanced respect from his peers and superiors. The incident that could have damaged his career instead became a defining moment that showcased his character and professionalism under pressure. The story served as a reminder that in a complex society with multiple institutions and jurisdictions, clear communication and mutual respect are essential for preventing misunderstandings that can have far-reaching consequences. Both the police and military learned valuable lessons about the importance of proper protocols and the need for ongoing cooperation between civilian and military authorities. Today, the enhanced procedures developed as a result of Thompson's detention continue to prevent similar incidents, ensuring that those who serve their country in ceremonial roles are treated with the respect and understanding their service deserves. The case remains a testament to how individual professionalism and institutional responsibility can transform a negative experience into positive change for everyone involved.